She was dragged through burning canyon dust by her hair tied to a saddle like livestock, screaming a name that nobody answered. Nobody except him. Caleb Mercer didn't ask questions. He didn't negotiate. He raised his rifle, and the canyon learned what justice sounded like. This is the story of a woman who was never supposed to survive, and the mountain man who decided otherwise. If this story moves you, subscribe and follow every part to the end. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. The rope was braided leather, sun-dried and stiff, and it had been knotted around Lillian Harper's wrists since before the sun broke over Bitterroot Canyon. She didn't know exactly how long she'd been moving. Time had stopped meaning anything around the third hour when the horse's pace had ground her knees into the canyon floor twice, and the man holding her lead rope hadn't looked back once. His name was Decker. He worked for Jebediah Rustin, who worked for the Silver Meridian Mining Company, and that chain of ownership was the only law that mattered in Garnet Hollow. Lillian knew that now. She hadn't always known it. There had been a time not so long ago, though it felt like another woman's life, when she'd believed her father's debts were something that could be paid down, worked off, negotiated. She had believed that because she was 22 years old and had never had reason to believe otherwise. She understood things differently now. "Move," Decker said without turning. She moved. Her boots had split along the left sole 3 miles back. The canyon rock bit through with every step. She kept her eyes on the ground, because looking up meant looking at the rope, and looking at the rope meant feeling it, and feeling it meant remembering the moment they'd put it on her, the moment she'd stopped being Lillian Harper and started being collateral. The summer heat in Bitterroot Canyon was the kind that didn't ask permission. It sat on a person's shoulders like a second body. Sweat had dried white along the edges of her collar. Her hair, what wasn't matted to the side of her face, hung down her back in a tangle that hadn't been brushed in 4 days. She was thinking about water, specifically about the creek she'd heard somewhere to the east. The sound of it just distant enough to be cruel when the rope went suddenly violently slack. She stumbled forward and caught herself on both palms against the canyon floor. Behind her, Decker's horse screamed. Not the horse. Decker. The sound cut off. Lillian pushed herself upright and turned, and what she saw didn't make immediate sense to her exhausted mind. Decker was off his horse. He was on the ground, not moving, and standing over him, not over him, past him, already. Past him, already walking toward her, was a man she had never seen before. He was tall. That was the first thing. Not just tall, but built like the canyon itself, like something that had been shaped by pressure and time, rather than born. He wore a hat pulled low against the sun, and his face, what she could see of it, was a weathered thing, angles and lines, and the particular stillness of a man who had spent years alone with weather. He had a rifle in his right hand. He wasn't pointing it at her. He stopped 6 feet away. His eyes were dark and level, and they moved across her the way a man assessed damage, not in cruelty, but in the particular efficient grief of someone who had seen bad things before and was cataloging another one. "You all right?" he said. His voice was low. Canyon quiet. The kind of voice that didn't carry far because it didn't need to. Lillian looked at the rope still attached to her wrists. She looked at Decker on the ground. She looked back at the man. "Who are you?" she said. "Caleb Mercer." He said it the way a man states a fact. Not an introduction. Just information. "I've got a camp about 2 miles up the North Ridge. You can walk, or I can bring the horse around." "I can walk," she said immediately. Something shifted in his expression. Not a smile. Just an acknowledgement, like he'd expected that answer and found it satisfactory. "All right," he said. He reached into his coat pocket and produced a folding knife. "Hold still." She held still. He cut the rope from her wrists in 2 clean strokes and stepped back the distance, deliberate, giving her space she hadn't been given in 4 days. She rubbed her wrists. The skin underneath was raw and red in a band around each one. "That man," she said, nodding toward Decker. "Is he? He's breathing." Caleb said it without looking back. "He'll have a headache. He'll also have a story to tell Jebediah Rustin. which means we need to move before he wakes up and decides to be brave about it." Lillian went very still. "You know Rustin," she said. "I know of him." He was already turning, moving toward where his horse stood, ground-tied 30 yards up the canyon. "Enough. You coming?" She looked at Decker again. She looked at the rope lying in the dust. She followed Caleb Mercer up the canyon. She didn't talk for the first hour. Neither did he. That surprised her. Every man she'd encountered in the past 4 days had talked constantly explanations of her situation, justifications of the company's legal standing, descriptions of what would happen if she ran again. Decker had talked the entire first day until she'd stopped responding to anything, at which point he'd lapsed into the occasional grunt and the periodic move. Caleb Mercer didn't explain himself. He walked ahead of her on the trail with his horse's lead rope in his left hand and his rifle across his back, and he moved through the mountain terrain like a man who had walked it so many times his feet knew the path without instruction. After a while, she started watching him instead of the ground. "You live up here," she finally said. "Yes." "Alone?" "Yes." She waited for more. More didn't come. "For how long?" she asked. He was quiet long enough that she thought he wasn't going to answer. Then, 6 years, give or take. "Why?" He glanced back at her over his shoulder, just once. "Because it's honest," he said. She didn't know what to do with that, so she didn't say anything else for another half-mile. The cabin sat on a shelf of rock overlooking a high valley, and the first thing Lillian noticed was that it was sturdy, not pretty, not comfortable looking particularly, but built by someone who understood weight and weather. The logs fitted tight, the roof steeply pitched, a stone chimney on the east side that had clearly been repaired more than once. A small outbuilding stood to the north. A split-rail fence ran along the south side, enclosing a garden plot that was currently producing something green in orderly rows. She stopped at the edge of the yard. "This is yours," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." "You built it?" "Most of it." He was already moving toward the outbuilding, leading his horse. "The chimney I rebuilt. Original builder put it on the wrong side. Gets the morning wind straight down the flue otherwise." She looked at the chimney. She looked at the garden. She looked at the careful, deliberate order of the place, everything positioned where it was for a reason, nothing wasted, nothing decorative. "You know a lot about building," she said. "I know a lot about winter," he said from inside the outbuilding. "Same thing up here." Chud. He made coffee. She sat at the single table in the cabin's main room and watched him move around the small space, and she was aware of the particular animal alertness she had developed over the past 4 days. The constant monitoring of where his hands were, how close he was, whether his body was angled toward her or away. He was always angled away. She noticed that. When he moved past her to get something from the shelf, he went wide, giving her more room than the small cabin required. When he set the coffee cup in front of her, he set it on the table and stepped back before she reached for it. She wrapped both hands around the cup. "Why did you help me?" she said. He sat down across the table. He had his own cup. He looked at it for a moment before he answered. "I saw what was happening," he said. "Plenty of people saw what was happening. Nobody else did anything." "I'm not plenty of people." She studied him. He was looking at his coffee the way some men looked at a fire, not really seeing it, seeing something else through it. "The company has men all through this valley," she said. "If they find out you—" "They'll find out," he said. "Decker wakes up, he goes back to Rustin. Rustin sends men up the mountain. That's how this works. And that doesn't concern you." He looked up at her then. His eyes were the color of creek water, in shadow gray-green and still. "Miss Harper," he said, "I live on a mountain. I have for 6 years. If Jebediah Rustin could run me off it, he'd have done it before now." She was quiet for a moment. "How do you know my name?" she said. "Garnet Hollow talks," he said. "Mining towns always do. Word came up the mountain 2 weeks ago that Clement Wardlow's company had called in the Harper debt. Said you'd be working it off at the company house." A pause. I didn't know what that meant exactly until I saw Decker dragging you through the canyon this morning. Lillian set her coffee cup down. Her hands, she noticed distantly, were shaking slightly. My father borrowed $400, she said, 3 years ago. He needed the equipment or the shaft would have collapsed. He paid back $230 before the lung sickness took him. She kept her voice flat. She had learned in the past 4 days that flat was the only way to say any of this. Wardlow said the remaining debt transferred to me as next of kin. Said the company charter gave them the right to collect in labor if cash wasn't available. Caleb said nothing. I told them I'd get the money, she said. I told them I needed time. I told them... She stopped. Her jaw was tight. It didn't matter what I told them. No, he said quietly. I reckon it didn't. She looked at him. You believe me, she said. It came out sounding more like surprise than she intended. I don't have any reason not to, he said. And I watched Decker knot that rope around a woman's wrists and drag her across Canyon Rock, so I've got a fairly clear picture of what kind of operation we're dealing with. She picked up her coffee cup again, held it. They'll say I'm a thief, she said. They'll say I stole from the company. They'll say you helped me evade legal debt collection. They'll say a lot of things, Caleb said. Up here nobody can hear them. Yeah. She slept for 14 hours. He gave her his bed, the only bed, a narrow wood frame thing with a rope mattress and a wool blanket. And when she woke up, it was the following morning, and the cabin smelled like something cooking, and she lay there for a full minute before she remembered where she was and why. When she came out, he was at the fire. He'd made a kind of hash from dried meat and root vegetables, and he set a bowl on the table without being asked. You should eat, he said. I know I should eat, she said, but she sat down and ate. He sat across from her with his own bowl, and they ate in silence. And it was, she realized, the first meal she'd had in 4 days, where no one was watching her. I need to understand something, she said when the bowl was half empty. He waited. What happens now, she said. Not today. In general. What's the plan? Rustin sends men, he said. I expect within 3 or 4 days once Decker makes it back to town and Rustin decides how he wants to play it. He'll either come himself or send his crew. And then they come up the mountain, Caleb said, and they find out that's not a good idea. You can't fight a mining company, Lillian said. I'm not going to fight a mining company. I'm going to defend my property. His voice was even, like he was explaining something obvious. This is my land. Legally filed, government surveyed, taxes paid. They come up here with guns, they're not collecting a debt. They're trespassing. That distinction won't matter to Rustin. Might matter to the territorial marshal's office, he said. She stared at him. You'd go to the marshal, she said. I'd write to the marshal, he said. Already did this morning before you woke up. Sent it down the mountain with my supply runner. Man named Aldous comes up every 10 days. He'll have it in Missoula inside a week. Lillian sat back in her chair. The bowl was still in front of her, but she wasn't looking at it. You planned this, she said. I planned for possibilities, he said. There's a difference. Most men, she said slowly, don't write letters to federal offices on behalf of women they met yesterday. He was quiet for a moment. Most men, he said finally, don't drag women through Canyon Rock on a rope. She had no answer to that, so she finished her food. Done. 3 days passed. They found a rhythm, the two of them, which surprised her more than anything else about the situation. She had expected awkwardness, at minimum the particular tension of two strangers forced into close quarters. She had expected to feel watched, monitored, managed. She did not feel any of those things. He worked. He worked constantly, steadily, without urgency, the kind of labor that was simply the ongoing cost of mountain life. Firewood fence repair, tending the garden, checking the snares he'd set along the North Trail. He moved through it all with the quiet efficiency of a man who had been his own only company for 6 years, and had made his peace with that fact. She started helping. Not because he asked. He didn't ask. But because standing still made her feel like debt property again, and moving made her feel like herself. On the second day, she split wood. He showed her the technique, once blade angle follow through, how to read the grain, and then stepped back and let her work it out. She split wood for 2 hours. Her shoulders ached in a way that felt earned. "Not bad," he said when she stopped. "You're generous," she said. "I'm honest," he said. "There's a difference." She'd laughed. Actually laughed. It surprised them both. On the third day, she asked him about the rifle. They were at the split-rail fence, she holding boards, while he drove new posts when she said, "Will you teach me to shoot?" He drove the post, tested it, drove it again. "You know how to handle a firearm," he said. "I know the general idea," she said. "My father had a shotgun. I know not to point it at anything I'm not prepared to destroy." "That's a solid foundation," he said. "I'm serious," she said. "If men come up this mountain and I know they're coming, I don't want to be the person you're trying to protect while also trying to fight. I want to be useful." He looked at her then, that assessment look again, like he was measuring something. "All right," he said. After supper, he set up tin cans on the fence rail and stood behind her left shoulder while she worked through the fundamentals. Stance, grip, breath. He corrected her twice, once on her trigger finger, once on her follow-through, with the same economy of words he applied to everything. No praise, no criticism, just information. She missed the first 4 shots. She hit the 5th. The can spun off the rail and she felt something unlock in her chest. "Again," he said. She hit the next 3 in a row. When she turned around, his expression hadn't changed, but she'd been watching him long enough by then to read the small things, the slight easing around his eyes, the way he let out a breath slowly. "You've got a good eye," he said. "Don't sound so surprised," she said. "I'm not surprised," he said. "I'm pleased." She looked at him. "Why?" she said. He took the rifle from her and checked the load. "Because I sleep better," he said, "knowing the people under my roof can defend themselves." She understood then that he wasn't talking about the mountain. Or not only about the mountain. On the 4th evening, she found him sitting outside after dark on the flat rock to the east of the cabin, where you could see the valley below, and on clear nights, the faint distant lights of Garnet Hollow. She sat down beside him. Not close. A foot of rock between them. "You miss it," she said. "Town. People." "No," he said. "Never." He thought about it. She'd noticed he always thought before he answered. Most men she'd known answered first and thought afterward, if at all. "I miss what towns are supposed to be," he said finally. "What I actually miss is a thing that doesn't exist, or doesn't exist down there anyway." She looked at the distant lights. "What happened?" she said. "6 years ago. What made you come up here?" The silence lasted long enough that she almost apologized for asking. "I had a wife," he said. "Missouri. We had 40 acres and a decent house, and we were going to have a family." Another silence. Cholera came through in the summer of '74. She was gone in 4 days. Lillian was very still. "I'm sorry," she said. "The town wanted to help," he said. "They meant well, I think, most of them. But every time someone came by with a covered dish or a Bible verse, He stopped, started again. "I couldn't breathe in that place after. Everywhere I looked, she was supposed to be there and wasn't. So I left. And came here. And came here." He looked up at the sky. Stars were coming out above the ridgeline, thick and bright in the mountain dark. "Mountains don't pretend," he said. "They don't apologize for what they are. There's something clean about that." Lillian drew her knees up. "I was never allowed to be anything," she said. It came out quiet. She hadn't planned to say it. "My whole life I was someone's daughter, someone's liability, someone's collateral. I don't know who I am when there's nobody telling me what I owe." He looked at her. The stars were bright enough that she could see his face clearly. "You split 2 cords of wood in 2 days," he said. "You shot a moving tin can at 40 yards in fading light. You walked 2 miles through canyon rock and split boots without complaining once." He held her gaze. "That's who you are, Miss Harper. Whatever they told you in that town, that's who you actually are." She didn't say anything. She didn't trust her voice right then. They sat there in the mountain dark until the lights of Garnet Hollow went out below them one by one and the valley went as black as the sky. Neither of them went inside for a long time. Later, on the 5th morning, she woke to the sound of horses. Not one horse, not 2. She lay still for 3 full seconds listening, counting the rhythm of hooves on the trail below the cabin. Then she got up, pulled on her boots, and took the rifle from the hook beside the door, where Caleb had moved it 2 nights ago, within reach of whoever needed it first, he'd said without explanation. She stepped outside. Caleb was already at the fence line watching the trail below. He had his rifle in the crook of his arm. He didn't look at her when she came up beside him. "How many?" she said. "Can't tell yet," he said. "Dust says more than 5. She checked the rifle's load. Her hands were steady. She was slightly surprised by that. "You said they'd come," she said. "I said they'd come," he agreed. Below them, the dust cloud resolved into shapes. Men on horseback coming up the switchback trail, taking their time. Not running. Not rushing. The unhurried pace of men who didn't expect resistance. At the front of the column, dressed in a gray coat that cost more than most men in Garnet Hollow made in a year, rode a man she recognized. Not Decker. Someone above Decker. "That's Rustin," she said. Caleb looked at him. "Yes," he said. "It is." She could feel the particular quality of his stillness beside her. Like a mountain, she thought. Like something that has been standing in one place long enough that it has forgotten how to move or simply decided not to bother. Below Jebediah, Rustin pulled his horse to a stop at the edge of the cabin's approach and looked up at them with the expression of a man who had decided in advance how this conversation was going to go. "Mercer," he called out. "You know why I'm here." "I know why you think you're here," Caleb called back. His voice carried without effort, flat and clear as a rifle shot. Rustin smiled. It was the kind of smile that meant nothing good. "I want the girl," he said. "You hand her over, and there's no trouble here. You've got my word on that." Lillian's hands tightened on the rifle. Caleb said nothing for a moment. Then he turned his head very slightly and looked at her. Just a look. A question without words. She lifted her chin. He turned back to Rustin. "She doesn't belong to you," Caleb said. "She belongs to the Silver Meridian Mining Company by lawful debt claim," Rustin said, still smiling. "That's not a matter of opinion, Mercer. That's a matter of company charter and territorial law." "I've written to the territorial marshal about that charter," Caleb said. "Seems to me there are some questions about whether it applies the way you're saying it does." Something shifted in Rustin's expression, barely, but she caught it. "You wrote to the marshal," Rustin said. "I did." "The marshal's in Missoula," Rustin said. "That's a long way from here." "It is," Caleb agreed. "You're welcome to wait for him." Rustin looked at the men around him. He looked back up at Caleb. His smile had gone somewhere else. "Last chance," he said. "Send the girl down." Caleb raised his rifle. Not quickly, not dramatically. With the same deliberate economy he applied to everything steady and absolute. "Get off my mountain," he said. Rustin's horse danced sideways. The man controlled it without looking down, his eyes fixed on Caleb. Then he turned the horse around. "We'll be back," he said. "I'll be here," Caleb said. She watched Rustin and his men descend the switchback trail, the dust rising behind them in the summer heat. And she kept the rifle up until they were out of sight. Then she lowered it. "He's not done," she said. "No," Caleb said. "He's going to come back with more men." "Yes." She looked at him. "Then we'd better be ready," she said. He looked at her, that steady measuring look, and this time she thought she saw something behind it that she hadn't seen before. Not just assessment. Something warmer and more complicated than that. "Yes," he said again. "We'd better." The summer heat pressed down on the mountain, and the canyon below lay silent and bright, and somewhere in Garnet Hollow, Jebediah Rustin was already counting his men. Rustin's dust hadn't even settled on the switchback trail before Lillian turned away from the fence line and walked back toward the cabin. Caleb followed her inside. He leaned his rifle against the wall and stood watching her as she moved to the fire, picked up the coffee pot, put it back down without pouring anything, and pressed both palms flat on the table. "He's going to tell everyone in Garnet Hollow that you kidnapped me," she said. "Yes. He's going to say you're holding me against my will, that you're a criminal, that whatever men he brings back up this mountain are acting inside the law." "Yes." She looked up at him. "Does that bother you?" Caleb pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. He laced his fingers together on the table and looked at them for a moment. "What bothers me," he said, "is that he counted his men before he turned that horse around. Did you notice that?" She had not noticed that. "What does it mean?" she said. "It means he came up here today to look, not to collect. He wanted to see the ground, see how many of us there were, see where the cabin sits and how the approach works." He paused. "He'll be back in 3 days, maybe 4, and he'll come with enough men that he thinks the numbers settle the argument before it starts." Lillian sat down slowly. "How many men does Rustin have?" she said. "In his regular crew, 8-10. But Silver Meridian can pay for more. Drifters, out-of-work miners, men who'll take $1 a day and a horse and not ask questions about what they're being pointed at." He looked at her steadily. "Could be 15, could be more." The number sat between them. "You said the marshal?" she started. "I said I wrote to the marshal. A letter takes a week to get there. A response takes another week. 2 weeks is a long time." He stood up, moving to the window that faced down the valley. "We can't count on outside help arriving before Rustin does. We have to work with what we've got." "Which is," she said. "This mountain," he said. "And us." She studied his back, the set of his shoulders, the way he looked down at the valley with something that wasn't fear and wasn't quite anger either, something colder and more patient than both. "You've been thinking about this," she said, "before today, before I even got here." He turned from the window. "I've been thinking about Jebediah Rustin for 2 years, he said. "He's been pushing the boundaries of company land north since '76, trying to absorb grazing range trap lines mining claims that don't belong to Silver Meridian. He's gotten away with it because the people he pushes don't have the resources to push back, and the marshal's office in Missoula has bigger problems to attend to." A pause. "I've been waiting for him to come far enough north that I'd have something worth writing about." Lillian stared at him. "You used me," she said. The words came out flat, but her eyes were sharp. He held her gaze without flinching. "No," he said. "I saw a woman being dragged through a canyon on a rope, and I stopped it. What I'm telling you now is that your situation isn't separate from a larger problem, it's the clearest example of it. Your father's debt, the way the company collected it, the charter they're using to justify it, that's the evidence the marshal needs, that I haven't had before now." She was quiet. "So I help you," she said slowly, "and you help me, and together we help everyone else. Rustin has been grinding down for 2 years. "That's about the size of it," he said. She picked up the coffee pot again. This time she poured 2 cups. "All right," she said. She set 1 cup in front of him. "Then stop treating information like it's something you dole out in pieces. If we're doing this together, I need to know everything you know." He looked at the cup. Then he sat back down. "Fair enough," he said, and he told her. He talked for almost an hour, which was, she suspected, more than he had talked in any single stretch in the past 6 years. He told her about the Hendersons, a homestead family Rustin had run off their grazing land by poisoning their well and blaming it on a neighboring claim. He told her about 3 trapline operators who'd sold out for less than their operations were worth after finding their gear systematically destroyed 2 seasons running. He told her about a mining claim legitimately filed that Silver Meridian had buried in legal paperwork until the owner ran out of money to fight it and abandoned it outright. He had records. That surprised her. Actual records written in a precise, economical hand. Dates and names and descriptions of incidents kept in a leather-bound journal he retrieved from under a board in the floor. "You've been building a case," she said. "I've been building the foundation of one," he said. "It's not a case until someone with legal authority decides to make it one." She turned the journal pages slowly. "My father's name isn't in here," she said. "No. I didn't know about your father until after he died." He reached across and turned to a page near the back. "But Clement Wardlow's name is, and Rustin's debt collection practices, and 3 other families whose situations are similar to yours." She read the entry. Her jaw tightened. "There are others," she said. "There are always others," he said. "That's how men like Wardlow and Rustin operate. They don't come after everyone at once. They come after people one at a time quietly so it looks like individual misfortune instead of a system." She closed the journal and looked at him across the table. "You're angry," she said, not accusing, observing. "Yes," he said simply. "You hide it well. I've had 6 years to practice." He took the journal back, held it for a moment. "Anger without direction is just noise. I needed something to aim it at." She understood then why he'd come down the canyon that day, why he hadn't hesitated, why he'd already written to the marshal before she'd even woken up that first morning. She wasn't a rescue. She was a reckoning he'd been waiting to begin. She wasn't sure how she felt about that. She sat with it. Then, "Show me the property lines," she said. "Your legal boundary. Show me exactly where your land ends and where his approach would cross it." He looked at her. "Why?" he said. "Because if they cross your boundary line with weapons and the intent to remove me by force, that's not debt collection," she said. "That's armed trespass with intent to commit assault, which is a different conversation with the marshal entirely." A long silence. "You know the law," he said. "My father argued his claim twice before company lawyers buried it," she said. "I sat through both hearings. I paid attention." Something moved in Caleb's expression. Respect, maybe. The particular kind that comes from being surprised in a direction you hadn't expected. "I've got the survey map," he said. "I'll get it." They spent the rest of the afternoon on it. The second day after Rustin's visit changed things between them in a way that was hard to name. She woke earlier than him, which hadn't happened before, and she found herself standing outside in the pre-dawn gray, looking down at the valley, working through the shape of what was coming, the way her father had taught her to work through a problem. Start at the end. Figure out what you need. Work backward to what you have. What she needed was time and legal standing, and someone with a badge to receive Caleb's letter and understand its implications. What she had was a mountain, a man who understood it better than anyone, and 11 days before Aldous came back up with a supply run, and whatever reply had arrived from Missoula, if any reply had arrived. 11 days. She was still working through the arithmetic when Caleb came out of the cabin and found her there. He didn't ask what she was doing. He just came and stood beside her, and after a moment he said, "You should sleep more." "I sleep enough," she said. "You were dragged through a canyon 4 days ago," he said. "Your body needs—" "My body is fine," she said, sharper than she intended. She heard it and adjusted. "I'm sorry, I know I'm not used to someone watching out for me." Silence. "I'm not watching," he said quietly. "I'm just standing next to you." She looked at him sideways. He was looking at the valley. "Is there a difference?" she said. "Yes," he said. "Watching means I think you need tending. Standing next to means—" He paused. "Means I reckon you know what you're doing, and I'm just here in case the view's better with company." She looked back at the valley. "It is?" she said. They stood there until the sun broke the ridge. He took her along the property boundary that morning. Not to show her the limits, though she paid attention to those memorized landmarks. The lightning-struck pine at the northeast corner, the dry creek bed to the south, but to show her the terrain itself. How it worked. How a man could use it or work against it. If they come from the main trail, they funnel here, he said, stopping at a narrow section where two rock faces pinched the path to barely 6 feet wide. Can't come more than 2 abreast. Slows them down, breaks their formation. And from the north, she said. Steeper, longer. They'd have to leave their horses a 1/4 mile down and come up on foot. He looked at her. That's not impossible, but it changes the math. What about the east face? She said. He was quiet a moment. How do you know about the east face? He said. I walked it yesterday while you were mending the fence, she said. There's a draw up there, not on your survey map, runs north to south. Someone who knew it was there could come up behind the cabin without hitting your main approaches at all. He turned and looked at her with an expression she hadn't seen before. You walked the east face alone, he said. I'm not helpless, she said. I know you're not helpless, he said. He stopped, started again. You're right about the draw. I know about it. I should have told you. Yes, she said. You should have. He looked at the east ridge. I'll cover it, he said. We'll cover it, she said. Tell me what you need. He told her. They worked for 3 days like that building, preparing, thinking 3 moves ahead of men who didn't know they were already anticipated. Caleb moved with purpose and economy, and Lillian matched him, step for step, and gradually the careful formal distance between them, the way he always went wide around her, always waited, always gave her space, started to change into something different, into something. Not closeness exactly, not yet. But the space between them became comfortable rather than deliberate. She stopped noticing how much room he gave her because it had stopped feeling like caution and started feeling like consideration, which were not the same thing. On the second evening, he was sharpening his knife at the table, and she was oiling the rifle, and she said without looking up, Tell me something you've never told anyone up here. He kept sharpening. No one comes up here, he said. Then it should be easy, she said. He was quiet long enough that she let it go. Then, I almost left, he said. 2 years in. Winter was bad, supplies ran short. I got sick for 3 weeks with something in my chest. I thought this was a mistake. I thought I'd come up here to die and hadn't realized it. He looked at the knife blade. But then the spring came and I don't know. I was still here, and I thought if I was still here I might as well stay. She looked up at him. What made you sick? She said. Don't know. Whatever it was, the mountain burned it out eventually. A slight shift in his expression. I've been healthy as an ox ever since, which I figure is either the altitude or the lack of company. Or both, she said. Or both, he agreed. She went back to the rifle. I'm glad you stayed, she said. He set the knife down. She kept her eyes on her work, but she was aware of him looking at her, and she was aware of the precise measured quality of his silence. Not empty silence, but full silence, the kind that has weight and direction. So am I, he said finally. She didn't look up, but she felt something shift in the room, subtle, like a change in air pressure, before weather, like the moment before something becomes something else. She kept her hands steady and said nothing because some things didn't need words, and she was learning slowly to trust that. The twist came on this 9th day. Aldous arrived early 2 days before she'd expected him, and he came up the mountain at a pace that meant he wasn't taking his time. And when he reached the cabin, his face was the face of a man carrying bad news he'd been rehearsing how to deliver. Caleb met him at the fence. What happened? He said. Aldous, small-weathered, somewhere north of 60, with the permanently squinted expression of a man who had spent decades reading trail conditions, pulled a folded paper from his coat and held it out. Letter came back from Missoula, he said. Fast. Faster than it should have. Caleb unfolded it. Lillian came out of the cabin and stood at the fence and watched his face as he read. She had learned to read his face. It wasn't easy, he kept it quiet by habit. But she'd had 9 days of practice, and she saw the precise moment the letter said something that mattered. His jaw tightened. A fraction. Once. He folded the letter and looked at Aldous. "Who else knows about this?" he said. "I didn't read it," Aldous said. "But Rustin's got a man at the postal office in town. Been there for months, way I hear it. Anything coming in or going out that's addressed to a federal office?" He shrugged. "Rustin knows about it soon as it's sent." Caleb looked at the letter in his hand. "He knew I wrote to the marshal," he said. "Before your letter was halfway to Missoula, I'd reckon," Aldous said. Lillian said, "What does the letter say?" Caleb handed it to her. She read it. The marshal's office in Missoula had received his letter. They took the matters raised seriously. However, the territorial jurisdiction of Silver Meridian Mining Company's debt collection practices was currently under review by the Federal Land Office in Helena, which took precedence over the marshal's authority until the review was concluded. The marshal was therefore unable to dispatch a deputy until the Helena review was resolved. The Helena review was estimated to take 60 to 90 days. She lowered the letter. "Rustin got to Helena," she said. "Or someone got there for him," Caleb said. His voice hadn't changed, but his hands at his sides had closed into fists and opened again. "He tied up the marshal legally," she said. "He knew you wrote to Missoula, and he already had people in Helena. He was ready for this." "He's been ready for this," Caleb said. "He's been building that legal architecture for 2 years. The Federal Land Office review the company charter provisions, the postal informant. That's not something you put together in 9 days. He had all of it waiting." Aldous cleared his throat. "There's more," he said. "In town. He's been talking." "What's he saying?" Lillian said. Aldous looked at her with something that was close to pity and something that was close to apology. "He's saying Mercer took you by force," he said. "Saying you're being held against your will up here. Got 3 men who'll swear to it." A pause. "And there are people in Garnet Hollow who believe it. Or say they believe it, which amounts to the same thing." Lillian's hands were very still on the letter. "He's reframing it," she said. "If Caleb is the criminal, then anything Rustin does to retrieve me is legal. It's not trespass. It's a rescue." "That's about the shape of it," Aldous said. She looked at Caleb. He was looking at her. "How long before he moves?" she said. "He's already been waiting longer than he wanted to," Caleb said. "The marshal letter bought us some time. He had to see what I'd written, had to get the Helena review in place before he could neutralize it. That probably added a week to his timeline." He looked down at the valley. "He'll come soon. 2 days, maybe less." Aldous said, "I can take the girl back down with me. Get her to—" "No," Lillian said. Both men looked at her. She held Caleb's gaze. "No," she said again, quieter, but no less certain. "If I go down that mountain now, Rustin picks me up on the trail, and the whole story ends the way he wants it to. And everything Caleb has been building, the records, the evidence." "Lillian," Caleb said. Her name. He'd been calling her Miss Harper until that moment, and neither of them acknowledged the change, but it was there. "I'm not running again," she said. "I told you that." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he turned to Aldous. "I need you to do something for me," he said. "Something harder than carrying a letter." Aldous raised an eyebrow. "I need you to go to Helena," Caleb said. "Not Missoula. Helena directly. Bypass the marshal's office entirely and go to the Federal Land Commissioner's office. In person. There's a man there named Beaumont Harrison. Beaumont, who I knew in Missouri before he moved west. He's honest. If you put my journal in his hands personally, not through the post, not through any office that Rustin has access to." "That's a 4-day ride," Aldous said. "Yes," Caleb said. "Each way." "Yes." Aldous was quiet. He looked at Lillian. He looked at Caleb. "You know I'm 63 years old," he said. "I know," Caleb said. "I also know you've hated Jebediah Rustin since he ran the Hendersons off their land in '76, and you had to watch Eleanor Henderson cry at the stage depot." A long silence. "I remember that," Aldous said quietly. "So do I," Caleb said. Aldous took his hat off, turned it in his hands, put it back on. "I'll need provisions," he said. "And a fresh horse. Mine's been working hard." "I've got a horse," Caleb said. "Better than yours. Aldous, tell Beaumont about the postal informant. Tell him Rustin has eyes in the marshal's office channel. Tell him anything that comes through official channels between here and Missoula is compromised." Aldous nodded. His jaw was set now. Something had settled in him. He looked at Lillian one more time. "You sure about staying, miss?" he said. She thought about Decker's rope. She thought about 4 days of canyon dust and split boots and a name she'd screamed that nobody answered. She thought about the rifle on the hook by the door that she had hit 3 out of 3 with last night in the dark. "I'm sure," she said. Aldous left within the hour. She watched him ride down the switchback on Caleb's better horse until the trail curved, and the dust was all she could see, and then even the dust was gone. She turned around. Caleb was already moving. Not running, he didn't run. She'd noticed that he simply increased the purpose in how he moved, going to the outbuilding, pulling things out, beginning the preparations he'd been planning since the first morning. She went to help him. They worked without speaking for a long time, the particular silence of two people who have said what needs saying and are now simply doing what needs doing. She was in the outbuilding inventorying the rifle ammunition more than she'd expected. Caleb was a careful man and a prepared one when he appeared in the doorway. "I need to say something," he said. She kept counting cartridges. "I'm listening," she said. "What happens in the next 2 days, it's going to be dangerous. More dangerous than I made it sound to Aldous." She looked up. "I know," she said. 15 men, maybe more. On a mountain in terrain, I know better than they do that helps. But it doesn't make the numbers disappear." He held her gaze. "I brought you up here to keep you safe. I want you to know that if there's a moment, any moment where you think leaving is the better choice, I won't." "Caleb," she said. He stopped. "I heard you the first time," she said. "And I told you I'm not running." She set down the cartridges and faced him fully. "You've been fighting for other people's land and other people's rights and other people's lives for 2 years from up here on this mountain alone. Nobody asked you to. Nobody's going to thank you for it. And you just sent your only outside contact on an 8-day ride to Helena on the strength of an old friendship because it's the right thing to do." She paused. "I'm not leaving you to finish this alone." He was very still in the doorway. "Why?" he said. "Because you didn't leave me in that canyon," she said. The silence was the longest one yet. Then he said quietly, "We should finish the inventory." "Yes," she said. "We should." She picked up the cartridges. And outside the summer afternoon stretched long and golden over the Bitterroot Highland, and somewhere far below in a mining town that had made its peace with injustice, Jebediah Rustin was counting his men again. They finished the inventory in silence, but it was a different kind of silence than the ones before it. Lillian had noticed over the past 9 days that silence had texture with Caleb Mercer. The first silences had been careful things, measured, deliberate, the silence of a man who had trained himself not to take up space. Then they had become comfortable. And now this one in the outbuilding with cartridges spread between them on the workbench had weight and warmth, and something she didn't have a name for yet. She was still thinking about what she'd said. "I'm not leaving you to finish this alone." She hadn't planned to say it. It had come out of somewhere below, planning below strategy, below the careful arithmetic of survival she'd been running in her head since Aldous rode south. It had come out true, which was the most unsettling thing about it. Caleb set the last of the rifle cartridges in the box and closed the lid. 47 rounds for the Winchester, he said. 31 for the Colt. I've got powder and ball for the old Hawken if it comes to that, but I'd rather it didn't." "Why?" she said. "Single shot. Takes time to reload. If I'm down to the Hawken, things have gone badly wrong." He picked up the box and moved it to the shelf above the door. "We won't get to the Hawken." "How can you be sure?" He looked at her over his shoulder. "I can't," he said. But I've found it's better to commit to a thing than to hedge it. She thought about that. My father used to say something like that, she said. He'd say, worry is just praying for what you don't want. Caleb was quiet a moment. Smart man, he said. He was, she said. Just not smart enough about who he borrowed money from. She said it without bitterness. She'd moved through the bitterness somewhere in the second day. Here worked it out through split wood and rifle practice and the particular mercy of physical exhaustion. What was left wasn't forgiveness. She wasn't ready to call it that, but it was something cleaner than rage. Something she could carry without it dragging. Caleb came back to the workbench. He stood across from her, not looking at her, but not looking at her either, in that particular way he had of occupying the same space without pressing. Tomorrow, he said. I want to walk you through the east draw again. There are 2 positions up there that matter. I want you to know them in the dark. In the dark, she repeated. If they come at night, which I don't think Rustin will, he's a daylight man. He wants his crew to see what they're doing, but if they do, I want you already knowing the ground. She nodded. And if they come in daylight, she said. Then we'll see them coming, he said. And that's the advantage. She looked at him. You keep talking about advantages like you believe they're enough, she said. They have to be enough, he said simply. So I believe they are. She wanted to argue with that logic. She couldn't find the flaw in it. That night, sleep didn't come easy. She lay on the rope mattress and listened to the mountain wind against the roof. Something moving in the tree line to the north. The particular deep silence that existed only at high altitude, where sound didn't carry the same way it did in the valley, and everything felt closer and farther at once. She thought about Rustin counting his men. She thought about the marshal's letter. 60 to 90 days. 60 to 90 days while Aldous rode hard for Helena, and Rustin moved at whatever pace he chose. She thought about Caleb on the other side of the single wall between the main room and the outbuilding where he'd been sleeping since he'd given her the bed. She thought about the way he'd said her name that afternoon. Lillian. Not Miss Harper. Just her name like it was something he'd been holding for a while and had finally decided to set down. She was still thinking about it when she heard him get up. She lay still listening. His footsteps crossed the main room. The door opened, closed. She waited 2 minutes, then she got up, pulled her boots on, and followed. He was at the flat rock again, the east-facing one, where they'd sat 11 days ago, and watched the garnet hollow lights go out below them. He was sitting with his elbows on his knees, and his hands loose between them, looking at nothing in particular. He heard her coming. He didn't turn. She sat down beside him. You should sleep, she said. You should sleep, he said back. I can't. Neither can I. They sat with that for a moment. What are you thinking about? She said. He was quiet long enough that she thought he'd deflect. Then, Missouri, he said. My wife. Her name was Clara. He said the name carefully like it was something fragile he was testing the weight of. She would have liked you. Lillian felt something tighten in her chest. Why? She said softly. She wasn't afraid of things, he said. Or she was afraid she was plenty afraid, but she didn't let it make her smaller. She'd walk straight at whatever scared her. A pause. I watched you walk straight at Rustin's men yesterday. You had the rifle and your hands were steady, and you didn't step back once. I was terrified, she said. I know, he said. I could tell. Made it more impressive, not less. She looked at her hands in the starlight. Tell me more about her, she said. Clara. He was quiet a long moment, but it was a different quiet than usual. Not reluctance, just the care of a man reaching for something precious and not wanting to drop it. She laughed loud, he said. Too loud for polite company, she always said. She didn't care. She'd laugh at her own jokes before she finished telling them, and she'd say that was the only honest way to do it. He paused. She made the best coffee I've ever had. I have never been able to figure out what she did differently. I've used the same beans, the same water, the same fire. It doesn't taste the same. Lillian felt the ache of that, the specific particular grief of trying to recreate something gone. "She sounds wonderful," she said. "She was," he said. "She was the most, she was mine, and I was hers, and that was the whole of it." He looked up at the stars. "I wasn't angry at God when she died. I know people expect that. But I wasn't angry. I was just empty. Like someone had taken all the furniture out of the house and left the walls standing. And you filled it back up with the mountain," she said. "I tried to," he said. "Mountains are honest company. They don't ask you to be all right when you're not." She nodded slowly. "I never had that," she said. "Someone who was mine. I don't think I knew that was a thing a person could have until—" She stopped. He waited. She made herself finish. "Until the past 11 days, she said. "Watching you. The way you just decide what's right, and you do it. No deliberating, no calculating what it costs you. You just do it." She shook her head. "I didn't know people like that existed outside of the stories my mother told me when I was small." He turned and looked at her. "Your mother," he said. "What happened to her?" "She died when I was 9, Lillian said. "Fever. It was fast." She said it matter-of-factly, the way you said things that had been true for so long, they'd lost their acute edge, though they never fully stopped hurting. "My father raised me alone after that. He was a good man, a tired man by the end, but good." "He knew you were good too," Caleb said. She looked at him. "You didn't know my father," she said. "No," he said, "but I know you. 11 days. A pause. A man who raised you would have had to be something worth being." She felt the thing in her chest again, that tightening, like something being pulled taut, and then released. She looked away, before she said something she hadn't decided to say yet. "We should try to sleep," she said. "Yes," he said. Neither of them moved for another 10 minutes. The next morning hit different. She woke to light and the smell of coffee, and the precise, ordinary sounds of him moving around the main room, and for one clear moment before full consciousness arrived, she felt something that she hadn't felt in years. Safe. Not safe like nothing bad was coming. She knew better than that. Safe like she was in the right place with the right person, and whatever was coming, she was not facing it alone. Then full consciousness arrived, and she remembered the cartridge count and Rustin's men, and the Helena ride, and she got up. He had coffee on the table. He had the survey map spread next to it, weighted at the corners with a coffee tin, and a river stone, and his folding knife. "East draw first," he said when she came out. "Then I want to run through the main approach scenario, talk through positions." "Good morning to you too," she said, and sat down and picked up her coffee cup. He stopped, looked at her. "Good morning?" he said, like he was trying the phrase on and finding it fit. "Better," she said. Something crossed his face, the smallest thing. Almost a smile. Almost. They ate fast and went to work. The east draw was everything she'd told him it was, and he knew it. She could tell because he moved through it with the confidence of a man who had surveyed it many times, who had walked it in snow and rain and summer heat, and knew every angle of it. He showed her the 2 positions he'd mentioned. The first was a rock outcropping about a third of the way up the draw. Good cover, clear sightline back toward the cabin's rear wall, deep enough to hold for a sustained exchange if it came to that. "This is yours," he said. "If they split and come through here, you hold this position. You don't advance. You don't pursue. You hold it, and you make it expensive for anyone trying to move through." "And you," she said. "Main approach," he said. "I'll be at the ridge above the choke point." "You'll be alone at the choke point," she said. "I'll have the high ground," he said. "That's not the same thing." "It's enough," he said. She looked at him steadily. "Caleb," she said. 15 men. "I know the number," he said. "Then you know that you holding the choke point alone, Lillian." He turned to face her fully. "I have been on this mountain for 6 years. I know every inch of that approach. I know where the rock undercuts on the west side and makes footing treacherous. I know the place where the echo off the north face makes a sound seem like it's coming from the wrong direction. I know this ground the way those men never will, no matter how many of them there are." He held her gaze. "Trust the ground. Trust me." She wanted to push back. She had legitimate tactical objections, she'd been running them in her head all morning. But she looked at his face, and she understood something. He wasn't asking for her confidence as a courtesy. He was asking because it mattered to him what she thought, what she believed. "All right," she said. "But if the main approach breaks down, then I come to you," he said, "and we hold the draw together." "Promise me," she said. He looked at her for a moment. "I promise," he said. She nodded. They moved on. The twist came that afternoon, and it came from a direction neither of them had anticipated. She was at the fence testing the tension of the wire Caleb had strung along the cabin's north approach, a simple alarm system, not a barrier, just something that would rattle if touched in the dark, when she heard a horse on the trail. Not multiple horses. One. She had the rifle up and pointed down the trail before she'd consciously decided to raise it. The rider that came around the curve was a woman. Lillian held the rifle steady. The woman was perhaps 45, lean and sun-weathered, riding a gray mare with the ease of someone born to it. She wore a plain dark dress and a hat that had seen better years. She pulled the mare up short when she saw the rifle. "Don't shoot," she said. "Lord Almighty, don't shoot. I'm not armed, and I'm not with Rustin." "Who are you?" Lillian said. She didn't lower the rifle. "My name is Margaret Tully," the woman said. "I had a homestead 6 miles south of here. Had, past tense." She looked at the rifle. "Could you please put that down? I've had a very hard 4 days." Caleb came out of the outbuilding. He looked at the woman. He looked at Lillian. "Margaret Tully," he said slowly. "You know her," Lillian said. "Her husband was Thomas Tully," he said. "He had a grazing operation south of the Henderson claim, one of the names in my journal." The woman's expression changed when he said the journal. "You have a journal," she said. "Mercer, you've been keeping records." "Yes," he said. She closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, there was something in them that was close to relief and close to despair at the same time. "Thomas is dead," she said. 6 days ago. Rustin's men came for the final collection on a debt Thomas disputed for 3 years. There was an argument. It got physical. Her voice stayed flat with the particular control of a woman who had been crying for days and had made a decision to stop for now. "I buried him myself. I couldn't find anyone in Garnet Hollow who'd help me. And then I heard there's talk in the Valley, Mercer. People saying you've got the Harper girl up here. People saying you're planning to fight." "People shouldn't be talking about that," Caleb said. "People talk," Margaret said. "You know that." She looked at Lillian. "I heard about you too, miss. Heard what they did to your father. Heard what they were doing to you." A pause. "I need to be somewhere Rustin can't reach for a little while. Long enough for someone to listen to what happened to Thomas." Lillian looked at Caleb. He was already thinking. She could tell that slight stillness, the internal calculation running behind his quiet face. "Get down," he said finally. "We'll put your horse in the outbuilding." Margaret Tully got down. She told them everything over coffee. Thomas Tully had died of a blow to the head from a company man named Briggs, one of Rustin's regulars in a dispute over the boundary markers on their southern grazing field. Rustin's men had moved the markers 18 inches north over the course of 3 months, each adjustment, small enough to deny the accumulated total, large enough to matter. Thomas had confronted Briggs. Briggs had argued. One of the other company men had stepped in. There had been a struggle. Thomas had gone down and hadn't gotten up. "Did anyone see it?" Caleb said. "3 of my ranch hands," Margaret said. "All 3 have already left the valley." Rustin made it clear that witnesses to Thomas's to what happened would find their employment options in this region limited. "He threatened them," Lillian said. "He didn't have to threaten them directly," Margaret said. "He had someone tell them what happened to the last man who spoke against Silver Meridian in a territorial court." She paused. "Man named Edwards." Filed a complaint in 75. Lost his claim inside a month through some legal process Thomas never fully understood. Ended up working in a company mine for wages, last we heard. Lillian's jaw was tight. He has a system, she said. It's not violence first. It's law, then intimidation, then violence. Yes, Caleb said. He was looking at Margaret. Your hands, do you know where they went? North, Margaret said. They said north. Idaho, maybe. Could they be reached? Caleb said. In time? In time for what? Margaret said. In time to give statements, Caleb said. Not to the marshal, Rustin has that channel. To Harrison Beaumont at the Federal Land Office in Helena. I've already sent my man Aldous with my records, if he can bring witness statements about Thomas. Margaret's expression shifted. You have a contact in Helena, she said. A man I trust, Caleb said. Which is a rare thing, but it's what we've got. Margaret set her coffee cup down carefully. My hands' names are Cooper Watts and a younger man called Dix, she said. Cooper has a sister in Coeur d'Alene. He might have gone there. She looked at him steadily. If Aldous can reach them. Aldous is already 4 days north, Caleb said. He can't divert. But if you can write those names down, their descriptions, known associates' places they might land, I can put that in the next communication. There won't be a next communication through the post, Lillian said. Both of them looked at her. Rustin has the postal informant. Anything we send out through official channels he knows about. We need a different route. Silence. What route? Margaret said. Lillian thought. You came from the south, she said to Margaret. 6 miles south. How many homesteads between here and Garnet Hollow? 4, Margaret said. 2 of them company-friendly. 2 of them not. The 2 that aren't company-friendly, Lillian said. Would they carry a message in person by hand, not through the post? Margaret considered. The Garza family might, she said. Eduardo Garza's got no love for Silver Meridian. They tried to absorb his water rights 2 years back and he fought it through. He's still standing, which makes him a particular kind of stubborn. A slight, exhausted smile. Also, his eldest son rides fast. Lillian looked at Caleb. He was already looking at her. A second letter, she said. Different route. Addressed to Beaumont personally by name, not the office. Carried by hand, down to Garza, then by Garza's son, west and north, bypassing Garnet Hollow entirely. It could work, Caleb said. It has to work, she said. Because Rustin is coming in a day, maybe 2, and Aldous is 8 days out and back, and we need someone in Helena to be ready to act the moment this is over. Caleb stood up, went to the shelf where the journal was kept, retrieved it, came back to the table and opened it to the back cover where he'd kept a blank page for exactly this kind of need. Tell me everything again, he said to Margaret. Every date, every name, every specific thing you can remember. I'm going to write it down, and this time it's going to Helena before Rustin can stop it. Margaret Tully straightened in her chair. For the first time since she'd ridden up the trail, she looked like something other than a woman who had buried her husband alone. She looked like someone with purpose. All right, she said. Where do you want me to start? What? They wrote for 2 hours. It was dark by the time Caleb sealed the letter, not in an envelope, but wrapped in oilcloth tied with cord, the kind of package that could survive rain and hard riding and the inside of a saddlebag. He wrote Beaumont's name on the outside. Nothing else. Lillian watched him set it on the table. If Garza's son rides tonight, she said. He'll be 2 days ahead of Rustin's men getting to Helena, Caleb said. If Beaumont moves fast. Beaumont will move fast, Margaret said from across the table. She said it with certainty, like she knew something about it. I knew his wife before she passed. Eleanor Beaumont was a woman who did not tolerate slow movement on matters of justice. She raised her husband the same way. Caleb looked at her. You knew Eleanor Beaumont, he said. 30 years ago, Margaret said. Before Helena. Before any of this. She looked at the oilcloth package. Life is strange about circles. Lillian looked at this package too. Somewhere below them in the dark valley, Rustin was likely doing the same thing they were preparing. Calculating, planning the next move on a board they were all playing whether they'd chosen to or not. The difference was he had 15 men and a company behind him. They had a mountain, a letter, and each other. She thought about what Caleb had said. Commit to a thing. She reached across the table and put her hand over the package. Not picking it up. Just setting her hand on it the way you put your hand on something real to remind yourself it's there. Caleb saw. He put his hand over hers, not holding it, not gripping, just there, present. Margaret looked at her coffee cup with careful discretion. After a moment, Lillian turned her hand over under his. They sat like that for a while in the lamplight, with the letter between them and the mountain around them, and the night settling in close and cold. And neither of them spoke, because there was nothing left to say that their hands weren't already saying. Outside, the wind picked up along the east ridge. Tomorrow was coming, whether they were ready for it or not. Garza's son left before midnight. Lillian stood at the fence and listened to the hoofbeats fade south until the mountain swallowed them completely, and then there was only the wind and the dark and the particular silence of a decision already made and released into the world. She went back inside. Margaret had taken the floor by the fire without being asked. Rolled in a blanket she'd carried in her saddlebag and was asleep inside 10 minutes, with the abrupt, total exhaustion of a woman who had been holding herself upright through sheer will for 6 days and had finally found a place where she could let go. Lillian watched her for a moment, the way her breathing slowed, the way her face lost its careful control, and felt something fierce and protective rise in her chest. Caleb was at the table, the journal open in front of him, adding notes. She sat across from him. "You should sleep," she said. "Both of us should." "One more thing," he said without looking up. She waited. He wrote 3 more lines, closed the journal, looked up. "If Rustin comes while it's dark," he said, "the wire alarm on the north approach gives us maybe 40 seconds of warning. The east draw gives us less. If you hear the wire, anything even wind on it that sounds wrong, you wake me immediately. Don't assess it yourself first. You wake me." "And if it's you that's already awake," she said. "Then I wake you," he said. "We don't make decisions alone tonight." She looked at him. "Together," she said. "Together," he said. She went to the bed and lay down in her clothes and stared at the ceiling and waited for sleep to take her. And it did eventually, not peacefully but completely, the way exhaustion always won in the end. She dreamed about the canyon, the rope on her wrists. But in the dream, when she turned around, the man standing where Caleb had been was nobody. Just an empty trail. And she woke from that with her heart loud in her chest, and the gray pre-dawn light coming through the cabin's single east window, and Caleb already awake at the fire, and she understood with a clarity she hadn't expected that the dream had frightened her more than Rustin ever had. He came the next afternoon. They heard them before they saw them. Not the wire, they came from the main trail, openly not trying for stealth, the sound of horses and tack and men's voices carrying up the switchback with the confidence of numbers. Caleb was at the fence when the sound reached him. He turned and looked at Lillian, who was behind him, with the Winchester. "How many?" Margaret said. She was at the cabin door, her voice flat. Caleb listened. 16, he said. Maybe 17. Lillian absorbed that. "More than you expected," she said. "Some," he said. "Go to the east draw position, now. Don't wait." "Not yet," she said. "Lillian." "Not yet," she said again. "Let's see how he plays the opening. If he thinks this is a negotiation, we learn something. If he comes in with guns already out, we know something different." Caleb looked at her for 2 full seconds. The sound of horses was getting louder. "1 minute," he said. "If I tell you to go, I'll go," she said. "1 minute." He turned back to the trail. They came around the last switchback curve in a column that spread wide as soon as they cleared the tight section. Deliberate. Practiced men who had done this before. Not a mob. A formation, which was worse in some ways than a mob. Rustin was at the front. He looked different from the last time something had sharpened in him. The careful, pleasant manner gone something colder underneath. He pulled up 20 yards from the fence. He looked at Caleb. He looked at Lillian standing behind him. He looked at Margaret Tully in the cabin doorway. His eyes stopped on Margaret. Something shifted in his face. "Well," he said. "Mrs. Tully." Not a greeting, a calculation. "Mr. Rustin," Margaret said. "You've come a long way from your property," he said. "I don't have property anymore," she said. "Your man Briggs saw to that." The men behind Rustin were still, but the kind of still that was coiled, not settled. Lillian counted them without moving her head. 16. Caleb had been right. "I heard about Thomas," Rustin said with a sympathy so practiced it had worn smooth. "A terrible accident." "It was not an accident," Margaret said. "Courts will make that determination," Rustin said easily. "In the meantime, Mercer, we've been through this. You know why I'm here. The situation has not improved by waiting." "The situation has improved considerably," Caleb said. Rustin's expression didn't change. "How's that?" he said. "The Federal Land Office in Helena has my records," Caleb said. "The records I've been keeping for 2 years. They also have a detailed account of what happened to Thomas Tully from his wife in writing already on its way south." He paused. "And they have an account of a postal informant in Garnet Hollow who's been feeding information about official communications to a private company with interests in territorial land." Rustin went very still. Not the controlled stillness of a man in command. The tight stillness of a man who has just been told something he didn't know. "That last part," Caleb said quietly. "I didn't put in the letter you knew about." Lillian watched Rustin's face work through it. The postal informant Caleb had told her last night after Margaret was asleep. He'd included it in the oilcloth letter to Beaumont, hadn't mentioned it in the first letter which Rustin had presumably read, which meant Rustin had believed he had complete information. He didn't. "You're bluffing," Rustin said. "I don't bluff," Caleb said. "I've been building a case for 2 years. I had the evidence. I needed an incident clear enough that even a cautious federal office couldn't look away from it." He didn't look at Lillian when he said it, but she felt it, the acknowledgement of what her situation had made possible. "I've got that now." Rustin's jaw was tight. "Mercer," he said, "you are one man on a mountain. Whatever letters you've sent, whatever records you think you've got, it means nothing in the next 10 minutes. Send the women down to me, and this ends clean." "No," Caleb said. The word was so simple and so final that it seemed to alter the temperature of the air. 14 men behind me," Rustin said. 16, Caleb corrected. "And I've already accounted for every one of them." Rustin's hand moved, just slightly toward the men on his left. A signal. Caleb raised his rifle before the signal finished. "Don't," he said. Rustin's hand stopped. "You can't take 16 men," Rustin said. "I don't need to take them," Caleb said. "I need to make it cost more than it's worth. And I promise you, Rustin, I will make it cost." A silence stretched across the distance between them. Horses shifted. Tack clinked. Somewhere in the tree line, something moved. Then one of Rustin's men said from the back of the column, "Jeb, wire." Everyone heard it. Faint metallic, a rattle from the north side of the cabin that meant someone had hit the alarm line. Someone coming from the north. Someone who hadn't ridden up the main trail with Rustin. Caleb said, "Lillian, east draw, now." She went. She cleared the cabin's north corner at a run and hit the draw trail without slowing. Behind her, she heard Caleb's rifle fire once a single shot, not at Rustin's men, at something off the main trail, something she didn't have time to look at. She reached her position at the outcropping and dropped behind it and got the Winchester up, and what she saw coming down the east draw toward the cabin's rear wall was 2 men on foot moving fast and low, and they had not expected anyone to be where she was. She fired over their heads. The crack of it bounced off both rock faces and came back doubled. Both men dropped flat and dropped. "Don't move," she said. Her voice came out level. She was distantly surprised. "I can see both of you, and I won't miss the second shot." Neither of them moved. "Hands," she said. "Let me see them." 4 hands went up from the ground. She held the position, one eye on the 2 men in the draw, one ear tracking the sounds from the main approach. Caleb's rifle, again once the sound of horses suddenly in motion shouting, she couldn't fully make out. Then Margaret's voice from the cabin, sharp and unexpected. "Lillian, 3rd man coming around the south fence." She had half a second to make a decision. The 2 men in the draw were flat and unarmed, by their own hands showing empty. She pivoted south and saw the 3rd man coming fast around the corner of the cabin's fence line, already close, already raising his pistol. She fired. She hit his right shoulder. He spun and went down, the pistol skittering across the rock. She swung back to the 2 men in the draw, still flat, still hands up. "Smart," she said slightly breathlessly. Her hands were shaking. She noticed that academically, the way you noticed something about weather. They were shaking, but the rifle was steady. That was the part that mattered. From the main approach, the shooting had stopped. Silence. Not the clean silence of resolution. The held-breath silence of something paused. She heard Caleb's voice carrying clearly from the choke point above. "Rustin, call your men back." Then Rustin's voice, harder than before. "You shot 3 of my men, Mercer." "I shot 1, Caleb said. "Winged him same as the girl winged yours in the draw. The 3rd's down because he ran his horse into the undercut rock on the west side of the choke point, which I'd have warned him about if he'd given me the chance." A pause. "My other 13 men," Rustin started, "are sitting in the choke point behind a rock fall I brought down 20 seconds into this conversation," Caleb said. "None of them are hurt. All of them are going to be climbing over loose rock to get to me. That's going to take time. How do you want to spend it?" Lillian heard Rustin's silence from 50 yards away. She could almost feel it. "You're going to run out of ammunition eventually," Rustin said. "You're going to run out of men willing to cross a rockfall under fire eventually," Caleb said. "Which happens first?" Another silence. Then low from directly behind her, so close it nearly stopped her heart, a voice said, "Put the rifle down, miss." She had not heard him. She did not know how she had not heard him. But when she turned, there was a man she had not seen before. Not one of the 2 in the draw, not the one she'd shot, a 4th man who had come around the rock face from above while she'd been focused south, and he had a revolver 3 feet from her face. He was young, maybe 25. His hands were shaking worse than hers. She did not put the rifle down. "You shoot me," she said carefully, "and every person in earshot knows where you are." "I said put it down," he said. "I heard you," she said. "I'm telling you what happens next if you pull that trigger. Is that what Rustin sent you up here for, to shoot an unarmed woman?" "You're not unarmed," he said. "I will be," she said, "if you give me a reason to trust you. Are you giving me a reason?" His gun hand was shaking hard now. She kept her eyes on his face. Not the gun, his face. "How old are you?" she said. He blinked. "What?" he said. "How old?" she said. "You look about the same age as my cousin James. He's 24. He works a cattle ranch in Wyoming." A pause. "What's your name?" "I'm not," he started. "What's your name?" she said again. Quiet. Steady. Not a question the second time. "Webb," he said, like it surprised him to say it. "Webb," she said. "How much is Rustin paying you?" "Miss, I am going to need you to." "How much?" $1.50 a day," he said, and then looked like he'd surprised himself again. $1.50, she said. "And you're pointing a gun at a woman on a mountain because a mining company called in her dead father's debt." She held his gaze. "Is that what $1.50 pays for?" Webb's hand was still shaking, but his face was doing something different than it had been doing 30 seconds ago. "I didn't know," he said. "When they hired us on, they said—" "I know what they said," she said. "They said I was stolen property, that you'd be retrieving something that belonged to them." She let that sit. "Do I look like property to you, Webb?" The silence was long enough that the two men in the draw had turned their heads to watch. Webb lowered his gun. Not all the way, but down. "I don't want trouble," he said. "Then you've got a choice to make," she said. "Rustin's side of this or the right side of it. And I need you to make it in the next 30 seconds because I've got 2 men on the ground in this draw and 1 more around the south fence, and I need to know where you stand." Webb looked at the 2 men in the draw. He looked at her. He holstered the revolver. "I'm not shooting anybody today," he said. "Good," she said. "Sit down and don't move." He sat down. She turned back to the main approach and raised her voice. "Caleb, here." He called back close now. "I've got 3 secured in the draw," she said. "1 more who's made a better decision." A pause. Then, Rustin just made a run for the south trail. Everything in her chest dropped. "He's running," she said. "Without his men," Caleb said, and his voice had something in it she hadn't heard before. Not anger, not satisfaction, something colder. He decided the odds changed when the rockfall hit. He turned and rode before his own men finished sorting out what happened. One of the men in the draw, the larger one, laughed. A short, disbelieving sound. "He left us," the man said. "Yes," Caleb said. He had rounded the cabin corner and was coming toward her position, rifle in hand, moving fast. His hat was gone, and there was dust and a small cut above his right eye that was bleeding steadily, and he looked like the mountain itself had been walking. "He left you." He stopped at the outcropping and looked at the 4 men, 2 on the ground, 1 sitting on a rock with a holstered gun, and the one around south with a shoulder wound. He looked at Lillian. His eyes went over her completely, fast, checking. "You're all right," he said. It wasn't a question, but it was. "I'm all right," she said. He looked at the cut, which she hadn't noticed until he reached up and wiped blood from his eye with his sleeve. "You're bleeding," she said. "Rock fragment," he said. "When I brought the fall down, it's nothing." "It's bleeding on your face," she said. "I'm aware," he said. "Caleb. Lillian." He said it the way he'd said her name the night before on the flat rock with that particular weight. "I need to go after Rustin." She went very still. "He's running," she said. "Let him run. The letter's already on its way to Helena. If Beaumont acts..." "Rustin running means Rustin regrouping," Caleb said. "He goes back to Garnet Hollow. He gets new men. He comes back up here with a different story about what happened today. He's got the money and the connections to bury this before Beaumont can act on anything." His voice was level, but fast, the most words she'd heard from him in one stretch. "If I don't stop him now..." "You said you weren't going to fight a mining company," she said. "You said you were going to defend your property." "He's off my property," Caleb said, "which means this is different." "Caleb." She put her hand on his arm. He stopped. "Think about what you're saying. You ride after him alone in the dark. He's got a head start and men between here and town." "He doesn't have these men," Caleb said. He looked at the 4 in the draw. He looked back at her. She saw what he was thinking. "No," she said. "They left," said the larger man in the draw who had been listening. His name was, she would learn later, Clive. He said it without emotion, like it was a thing he was still working out the implications of. "Rustin he rode and left us here." Caleb looked at him. "You were hired for a job," Caleb said. "The job's done. You can walk down the mountain. Nobody's going to stop you." Clive looked at the man beside him, looked at Webb on the rock, looked back at Caleb. "What about the men in the rockfall?" he said. "They're fine," Caleb said. "Bruised and angry, but fine. They'll clear it in an hour." "And then what?" Clive said. "And then they walk down the mountain," Caleb said. "Same choice. Everyone goes home." Clive looked at his hands for a moment. "What about Rustin?" he said. "That," Caleb said, "is a separate matter." The silence stretched. Then Clive said quiet, "If you're going after him, and I'm not saying you should, I'm not saying that, but if you are..." He took the south trail fast. He's not a good rider when he's scared. He'll slow when the trail widens. About 2 miles south, there's a dry creek crossing rock bottom. Horses always slow there. Caleb looked at him for a long moment. Why? He said. Clive met his eyes. Because Thomas Tully was my neighbor before I went to work for Silver Meridian, he said, and I needed the $1.50 a day. A pause. And because I know what Briggs did, and I've been living with that. The east draw was quiet. Lillian took her hand off Caleb's arm. Go, she said. He looked at her. Margaret's inside, she said. Webb's made his choice. Clive knows the ground. I can hold this position until you're back. She met his eyes. Go stop him. And Caleb. I know, he said. Don't become them, she said. He looked at her for one full second, a look that carried more than either of them had said out loud in 13 days. And then he turned and moved south at a pace that was not quite a run, but close to it, rifle in hand, disappearing around the cabin corner. She stood at the outcropping and listened to his footsteps fade. Then she turned to Clive and Webb and the man with the shoulder wound who was sitting up now and looking pale and confused. All right, she said. Someone help him get that coat off so I can look at that shoulder. And someone tell me your name. Harlan, said the wounded man. Harlan, she said. You're going to be fine, but I need you to stop moving that arm. She went to him, and behind her the mountain settled into a silence that was different from all the silences before it, tense and wide open like a held breath, like the moment before something resolves into whatever it was always going to become. Margaret came out of the cabin with a cloth and a water tin without being asked. Their eyes met. He went after him, Margaret said. Yes, Lillian said. Will he catch him? Lillian pressed the cloth to Harlan's shoulder. He winced. Caleb Mercer has been on this mountain for 6 years, she said. Rustin spent one afternoon on it. Margaret looked south toward the trail Caleb had taken. Lord have mercy, she said quietly. Not a prayer exactly. Not exactly, not one either. Lillian focused on Harlan's shoulder and kept her hand steady and did not let herself think about the dry creek crossing 2 miles south, the rock bottom, where horses always slowed the man riding hard to catch a man who deserved to be caught. She waited. The mountain waited. And somewhere below, in the last of the summer light, the reckoning she and Caleb had been building toward for 13 days was running full speed down a south trail with nowhere left to go. Harlan's shoulder stopped bleeding inside 20 minutes. Lillian tied off the bandage with the precise economical movements of someone who had learned to do things correctly the first time, and Harlan sat very still through all of it, with the expression of a man reassessing every decision he'd made in the past 2 weeks. You've done this before, he said. My father's hands, she said. Mining accidents. I learned young. She tied the final knot and stepped back. Don't use that arm for 3 days. After that, move it slowly. If it swells or goes hot, you've got infection, and you need a doctor. Harlan looked at his shoulder, looked at her. I'm sorry, he said, for what I was part of today. She looked at him for a moment. I know, she said. Go home, Harlan. He nodded. He got up carefully and walked south, and she watched him go, and then she turned to where Clive and Webb were sitting against the cabin wall, and the three of them existed in the particular quiet of people waiting for something they can't control. Margaret came out with coffee. Nobody had asked her to make it. She made it anyway. Clive wrapped both hands around his cup. How long has he been gone? He said. An hour, Margaret said. The creek crossing is 40 minutes at a hard ride, Clive said. If Rustin slowed like I said, he'll be back, Lillian said. She said it the way Caleb said things, not because she was certain, because she had decided to be. Webb looked at her sideways. You love him, he said. It came out like an observation, not an accusation. Young man's voice, still surprised by the things he noticed. She didn't answer right away. Drink your coffee, Webb, she said. He drank his coffee, but she saw him almost smile. She set her own cup down and walked to the flat rock on the east side of the cabin, the one where she and Caleb had sat twice now in the dark, and she stood there and looked south and waited. The summer evening was long and gold and very still. She waited. She heard his horse before she saw him. One horse, one rider, the pace of someone coming home rather than someone being chased. She was at the fence when he came around the last bend, and the first thing she checked was whether he was upright, and he was, and then she checked his hands, and the rifle was across his saddle not raised, and then she checked his face. He was not unharmed. There was dried blood along his jaw from the rock cut that had reopened, and something in the set of his mouth that told her the hour had not been a clean one. But he was whole, and he was here, and he was looking at her like she was the first landmark he'd been navigating toward the entire time. He pulled the horse up at the fence and dismounted. "Rustin," she said. "At the creek crossing," he said, like Clive said. And he was quiet a moment. He looped the reins over the fence post with the deliberate movement of a man organizing his words. "He tried to run when he saw me coming," he said. His horse slipped on the rock bottom. He went down. A pause. He wasn't badly hurt, shaken, angry. He met her eyes. He had a lot to say. "I imagine," she said. "He said I had nothing, that the records meant nothing, that Beaumont would be handled the same way the marshal was, that men like me always." He stopped. His jaw was tight. "He had a great deal to say about men like me." She waited. "I had his gun," Caleb said. He was on the ground. His horse was 50 yards away. There was nobody within earshot. He said it plainly. It would have been the simplest thing in the world. The silence was absolute. "But you didn't," she said. "No," he said. "I didn't." "What did you do?" He reached into his coat and produced a length of rope. Not braided leather. Plain cord, the kind anyone carried for camp use. "I tied him to a tree," he said. "Wrists behind him around the trunk. Comfortable enough. He'll be there until one of his men finds him, or he works himself loose, whichever comes first." She stared at him. "You tied him to a tree," she said. "Yes. Jebediah Rustin, you tied him to a tree." "I also took his boots," Caleb said, "so he couldn't walk out before his men got there. And his gun. And his horse, which I've left at the Garza place on the way back up." Something was rising in Lillian's chest. She tried to hold it down and couldn't. She laughed. Not the surprised, reflexive laugh of 2 weeks ago. A full laugh from somewhere real. And she put her hand over her mouth, and it didn't help, and Caleb stood there watching her with something in his face that she was now certain was a smile, even if his mouth hadn't fully committed to it. "You took his boots," she said. "Man runs better with boots," he said simply. "I didn't want him running." She pressed both hands to her face and got herself under control, and when she looked at him again, the laughter had settled into something warmer and more permanent. "Come inside," she said. "That cut needs cleaning." "It's fine," he said. "Caleb." "It's inside," she said. He came inside. "Be mal checked." She cleaned the cut at the table while Margaret pretended to be very busy at the fire, and Clive and Webb sat outside and gave them the privacy that the small cabin's single room didn't technically offer, but that decent people could approximate. He sat still while she worked. He was good at sitting still. She'd noticed that early. It was one of the things about him that had taken her longest to understand, because she'd been trained from childhood to read stillness in men as either threat or absence. His stillness was neither. It was presence. The most complete kind. "Does it hurt?" she said. "Some," he said. "You should have said something earlier." "There were other things to attend to," he said. She pressed the clean cloth to the cut and held it. "You could have killed him," she said quietly. Not accusation, just fact. "Yes," he said. "Most men would have." "I'm not most men," he said. She looked at him. His eyes were level and close, and she was near enough that she could see the particular lines around them, the ones put there by weather and solitude, and 6 years of a life lived entirely on its own terms. "No," she said. "You're not." She held the cloth a moment longer than necessary. Neither of them said anything about that. Then Margaret said from the fire, not turning around, "Coffee's ready." Lillian stepped back. "Thank you, Margaret," she said, and her voice was only slightly different from normal. Clive left the next morning. Webb left an hour after him. Clive shook Caleb's hand at the fence, which surprised her. A long handshake, both men looking at each other with the acknowledgement of people who have ended up on opposite sides of something, and know it could have gone differently, and are both aware of that. "What will you do?" Caleb said. "Go back to the Henderson claim area," Clive said. "There's work there for a man who can fix fence and doesn't ask too many questions." He picked up his hat. "And maybe answer some questions, if the right person asks them officially." Caleb nodded. "I'll put your name in my next letter to Beaumont," he said. "As a cooperative witness. That'll carry weight." Clive nodded once. He turned and went down the trail. Webb lingered. He stood at the fence with his hat in his hands and looked at Lillian with the expression of a young man who has had a formative experience and is still processing it. "That thing you did," he said, "in the draw, talking to me instead of—" He paused. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," she said. "I had a gun on you," he said. "You had a gun near me," she said. "There's a difference. Your hands were shaking." "I was scared," he said. "I know," she said. "So was I. Being scared doesn't make you the enemy, Webb. It just makes you human." He looked at his hat. "I'm going to find different work," he said. "Good," she said. He put his hat on, looked at Caleb. "She's something," he said. "Yes," Caleb said. "She is." Webb went down the mountain. Lillian kept her eyes on the trail until he was out of sight, and when she turned around, Caleb was looking at her with that look, the one that had been developing over 14 days into something she didn't have a name for yet and was increasingly certain she didn't need one. "Don't say it," she said. "I wasn't going to say anything," he said. "You were thinking it loud," she said. Something crossed his face. Definitely a smile this time. Brief, but real. The twist that changed everything arrived on the 5th day after the confrontation. Not Aldous. Not a letter. A rider bearing a federal seal. He came up the mountain in the early afternoon. A young man in a government-issue coat with a badge she recognized as the Federal Land Commissioner's office, and he asked for a Mr. Caleb Mercer. And when Caleb said that was him, the man handed him an envelope with the kind of careful handling that meant its contents mattered to more people than just the recipient. Caleb opened it at the table with Lillian and Margaret on either side. He read it. He read it again. Then he set it down and looked at the ceiling for a moment, and Lillian picked it up and read it herself. Harrison Beaumont. Federal Land Commissioner for the Montana Territory had received Aldous' delivery 6 days prior. He had also received the oilcloth package from Garza's son 2 days after that. He had reviewed the records. He had cross-referenced them with the Federal Land Office's own files on Silver Meridian Mining Company, which apparently contained irregularities that had been flagged, but not yet acted upon. He had also received, and this was the part she read twice, a separate inquiry from 2 of Thomas Tully's former ranch hands, Cooper, and a man named Dix, who had made their way to the Federal Land Office in Coeur d'Alene and given statements there that had been forwarded to Helena. The result: Clement Wardlow had been placed under federal inquiry, pending investigation of Silver Meridian's land practices, debt collection methods, and the specific circumstances of Thomas Tully's death. A deputy federal marshal bypassing the Missoula office entirely. The letter noted pointedly was en route to Garnet Hollow. Jebediah Rustin was named in the inquiry, and at the bottom of the letter in handwriting slightly different from the official text, as if added after the formal language had been completed. The debt of one Lillian Harper accrued against the estate of her father, James Harper, is hereby suspended, pending federal review of Silver Meridian's debt collection charter. Miss Harper is advised that she is under no legal obligation to any representative of that company until the review is concluded. H. Beaumont. Lillian read that paragraph 3 times. She set the letter down. She put both hands flat on the table. Margaret read it over her shoulder and made a sound that was not quite a word. Caleb was watching Lillian's face. "It's not finished," he said quietly. "A review isn't a verdict. Beaumont can start the process, but he can't end it alone. This takes months, maybe longer, and Rustin's lawyers—" "Caleb," she said. He stopped. "I know," she said. "I know it's not finished." She looked at him. "But it started. Officially, federally. With our evidence and our names attached." She paused. "They can't make it disappear now." He looked at her for a long moment. "No," he said. "They can't." The government rider was given coffee and a meal, and directions back down the South Trail, and he went, and the 3 of them sat at the table with the letter in the middle, and the particular silence of people who have been in a sustained crisis, and have just felt the first solid ground under their feet. Margaret put her hand over her eyes. "Thomas," she said. "Just his name. Just once." Lillian reached across and put her hand over Margaret's. Nobody said anything for a while. Aldous came back on the 8th day. He looked like he'd ridden hard and slept little and eaten whatever was available, which for a man of 63 crossing mountain territory in high summer was no small thing. He came up the trail slower than usual, and when he reached the fence, he sat his horse for a moment before getting down, and Caleb went to him and took the horse's reins without being asked. "You got there," Caleb said. "I got there," Aldous said. He sounded like a man who had just recalled he was 63. "Beaumont is—" He stopped. "He's a serious man. He took that journal and he read it right there at his desk with me sitting across from him, and when he finished he looked at me and he said, 'This should have come to my office 2 years ago.' And I said, 'Yes, sir, it should have.' And he said, 'Well, better late than never.'" Caleb was quiet. "He's moving on it," Aldous said. "He was already moving on it before I left. Something about those ranch hand statements coming in on top of everything else he said, it changed the category of the matter from civil dispute to criminal inquiry." Lillian was standing at the fence, and she let out a breath she had been holding, she thought, for approximately 16 days. Aldous looked at her. "Miss Harper," he said, "I heard what happened up here while I was gone. Whole ride back up I was worried about what I'd find." "We're all right," she said. "I can see that," he said. He looked at Caleb, then back at her. "I can see quite a lot, actually." "Aldous," Caleb said. "I'm going inside to sit down," Aldous said. "My knees hurt. I'm 63 years old, and I've just ridden to Helena and back in 8 days, and I deserve a chair." He went inside. Lillian looked at Caleb. Caleb looked at Lillian. "He's not wrong," she said. "He can see quite a lot." "He's always been observant," Caleb said. "It's irritating." She almost smiled. The federal deputy marshal arrived in Garnet Hollow 11 days later, and what happened there over the following week was something neither Lillian nor Caleb witnessed directly, but that Aldous tracked through his supply network and reported up the mountain in pieces. Clement Wardlow was taken into federal custody on a Thursday. His company lawyer arrived from Missoula on Saturday and was reportedly seen arguing loudly in the street outside the Silver Meridian offices before being escorted inside. Jebediah Rustin, who had indeed been found tied to a tree by his men, bootless and furious, and who had spent the subsequent days rebuilding his position from the Garnet Hollow side, was served with a federal summons on Monday. The debt ledgers of Silver Meridian Mining Company were seized. All of them. Aldous brought that news on a Wednesday morning, and he said it with the satisfaction of a man delivering a verdict he'd been waiting years to hear. Margaret Tully was requested to travel to Garnet Hollow to give her formal statement, and she did, and Lillian rode with her as far as the switchback base and stood there, watching her ride south until the trail curved, and Margaret turned once and raised her hand, and Lillian raised hers back. She stood there a moment after Margaret was gone. Caleb had come down the trail behind her, quiet as always. He stopped a few feet back. "She'll be all right," he said. "I know," Lillian said. "She's Margaret Tully. She buries her own husband and then rides 6 miles alone up a mountain and writes legal statements and drinks coffee and doesn't cry where anyone can see her. A pause. She'll be more than all right. He came up beside her. They stood there the way they'd been standing in a lot of places over the past 3 weeks, side by side, not touching, not touching, with the particular charged ease of two people who have been through enough together that proximity has become its own language. "There's something I need to tell you," he said. She looked at him. "The federal letter," he said. "Beaumont's letter. The debt suspension." "Yes," she said. "That's not a permanent resolution," he said. "The review could take 6 months, a year. In the meantime—" He stopped, organized himself, started again. "In the meantime, you're suspended from the debt, but you're not clear of it yet. And Rustin is summoned, but not convicted. And there are people in Garnet Hollow who have believed his version of this story for 3 weeks. "I know all of that," she said. "I'm saying," he said, "that going back down there, if that's what you want to do, it's not going to be simple, not yet." She looked at the trail where Margaret had disappeared. "Where would I go?" she said. "I have no house. My father's claim is—" She stopped. "Everything I had was tied to a man who's now in federal custody." "Yes," he said. Silence. "Caleb," she said. "What are you actually saying?" He was quiet long enough that a lesser woman would have filled the silence. She didn't. "I'm saying," he said finally, "that the cabin has 2 rooms if I build the second one, which I've been meaning to do for 2 years. The south wall gets good winter light, and I've had the lumber staged since spring." He kept his eyes on the trail. "I'm saying the garden is too large for one person, and I've known it since I planted it. I'm saying—" He stopped. She waited. He turned and looked at her. "I'm saying I don't want you to go," he said, plain and flat and real the way he said everything. "I'm saying this mountain has been honest company, but it's been quiet company, and I've learned in the past 3 weeks that I don't want it to be quiet in the way it was before." He held her gaze. "I'm saying I'd like you to stay, if you want to, for no reason other than that I want you here, and I believe—" A breath. "I believe you might want to be here too." She looked at him. 3 weeks ago she had been tied to a horse in a canyon, screaming a name that nobody answered. She thought about her father saying worry is just praying for what you don't want. She thought about what Caleb had said on the flat rock, that she was who she was, regardless of what they'd told her in that town. She thought about split wood and rifle practice and coffee before dawn, and a hand over hers on a letter that was going to change things for people they hadn't even met yet. She thought about how she'd felt waking up that last morning before Rustin came with the smell of coffee, and the sound of him moving, and the word safe landing in her chest, like something that had been looking for a home. "The south wall gets good light," she said. "All winter," he said. "I've never built a room," she said. "I'll teach you," he said. "Same as the rifle. Show you once, step back, let you work it out." She looked at him for a long moment. "I have conditions," she said. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did. "Tell me," he said. "Equal say in decisions," she said. "Not your mountain and your cabin with me living in it. Our place if I stay. Both of us." "Yes," he said. "And you stop walking wide around me like I might startle," she said. "I've been watching you do it for 3 weeks, and I understand why you started, and I'm telling you now that you can stop." He was quiet a moment. "I'll try," he said. "And one more thing," she said. "Yes." She reached up and touched the cut on his jaw, fully healed now, just a pale line the way she'd been wanting to for 10 days without knowing it was what she wanted. He went very still, but not the guarded stillness of before, the present kind. The kind that meant he was here, entirely here, and staying. "Don't ever ride after a man alone again without telling me first," she said. He looked at her hand on his face. He looked at her. "That," he said, "I can promise." She lowered her hand, but he reached up and caught it before it was fully gone, and he held it not tightly, the way you hold something you don't intend to keep from leaving, but that you want to know you're holding while it's there. They stood like that on the mountain trail, with the summer afternoon long around them, and Garnet Hollow somewhere below, working through its reckoning, and the east ridge bright and clean above. "We should go back up," she said. "Yes," he said, but neither of them moved. The territorial hearing convened in Helena 7 months later. Clement Wardlow was convicted of fraudulent debt collection practices under federal charter. 3 other Silver Meridian officers were convicted alongside him. Jebediah Rustin was found guilty of criminal trespass assault against Thomas Tully, reduced from murder, a verdict Margaret called insufficient in a voice so level it was more devastating than fury and coercion of witnesses. He was sentenced to 8 years. It wasn't enough. Margaret said that too plain and clear in the hallway outside the courtroom, and Lillian stood beside her and didn't argue and didn't offer comfort that would have been hollow. She just stood there, which was what Margaret needed, someone standing next to her, not watching. 23 families in the Bitterroot Valley had debts to Silver Meridian suspended or discharged entirely. The company's land claims north of the established boundary were returned to their original owners or transferred to territorial jurisdiction. The Harper debt, $400 less, the $230 her father had already paid, was officially and permanently erased. The letter from Beaumont's office arrived at the Garnet Hollow postal office in February, and Aldous brought it up the mountain on his next supply run, along with 3 months' worth of other correspondence and a bottle of whiskey he said was for the occasion. Caleb read the letter, handed it to Lillian. She read it. She folded it and set it on the table and looked at it for a moment. "It's done," she said. "Yes," he said. She looked up at him. He was across the table watching her with that quiet, complete attention that she had stopped being surprised by and started relying on, like she relied on the east window for morning light. "My father would have—" She stopped. Her throat was tight and she didn't try to fight it. He would have hated that it took this long, but he would have— She pressed her lips together. He would have liked knowing it ended right. Caleb came around the table. He sat down beside her, not across from her. Close. "It ended right," he said. She leaned her head against his shoulder. He put his arm around her. They sat like that in the cabin that was no longer a single room. The south wall had gone up in October, Lillian having proven she had more aptitude for construction than either of them had expected, with the winter light coming through the new window and Aldous' whiskey on the table, and the mountain holding steady outside. In March, when the first suggestion of spring showed in the south-facing slope of the valley, a man from a newspaper in Missoula rode up to ask about the Silver Meridian case. He had heard there was a woman involved. He had heard there was a mountain man. He wanted the story. Lillian let him in, gave him coffee, and listened to his questions. When he asked if she planned to stay on the mountain or return to civilization, she looked at Caleb, who was at the workbench doing something with a harness that didn't need doing quite yet, and was listening to every word. She looked back at the newspaper man. "I am in a civilization," she said. "One I helped build." The man wrote that down. When he left, Caleb set the harness down. "He's going to print that," he said. "Good," she said. A pause. "You helped build it," he said, and the way he said it, quiet and direct and completely certain, was worth more to her than any letter from Helena. "I did," she said. She picked up her coffee cup, looked out the south window at the mountain coming back to life in the early March light. Thought about a canyon, a rope, a name she'd screamed that nobody answered except him. Thought about what it meant to belong somewhere. Not to belong to it, not to be owed to it. To belong with it, beside it, inside a life that you had helped to make real. She thought about all of that for exactly 1 moment. Then she stood up, set her cup down, and said, "The north fence needs another post before the ground thaws fully. Are you going to help me or not?" Caleb picked up his hat. "I'll get the post hole digger," he said. They went outside together into the clear, cold mountain morning, and the Bitterroot Highlands stretched wide and clean around them, honest as they had always been and would always be. And the woman who had once been called Collateral, and the man who had once been called a mountain savage, walked to the fence line side by side, and they worked and they were home.